Hi, I'm Stephanie.
And I'm Leon.
And we're doing something different today.
Yeah, it looks like it.
So there's a lot of stuff on this table.
I think it's all your stuff mostly.
It's mostly my stuff, but
yeah.
Basically, my idea behind all this is I like my iOS games.
Right.
And I like to be able to control them sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
So not everything you can play on a touchscreen, and some games aren't made as well for a touchscreen as they are for a controller. So I figured I'll show off some options if you do use an iPhone or iPad or iPod Touch, and even an Android device. Some of these do work on Android.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll go through a couple of them and just some brief history and some experiences.
So we got the granddaddy here.
The big granddaddy. This is the one that started it all. This is the iCade. And this started off as the April Fool's joke for ThinkGeek.com.
Yeah, and it seemed like a good idea. It doesn't even seem like a joke. It's like, that's a natural fit.
They called it a joke, and the day I saw that, I was like, it hurt me to know that it was a joke.
Yeah, this was inspired by the announcement of the original iPad. They thought that this would be a great use for that.
Yeah, and as far as I know, it was success.
Mm-hmm.
They put it in production. It looks a little bit different than what their original concept was, but basically for all you classic arcade cabinet nuts like myself and you want to take that experience home, this was able to do it.
Perfectly emulate the like sort of a mini arcade cabinet on your desktop.
Yeah, I mean, it has like a fake coin slot, just to capture that look.
Right, so they show up as Bluetooth controllers.
Yeah, Bluetooth controllers, but the thing is, it's a Bluetooth keyboard, really. So what these controllers are doing is they're emulating key presses on a keyboard. So if you were moving your joystick up, it would send, say, the letters W for up. And then when you release the joystick, it'll say, okay, the letter V is for down, and so on. So the downside to that is the game programmers have to incorporate this language into their games,
right,
in order for these controllers to work. So the downside is not every game works, and a lot of the larger companies are reluctant to adopt Bluetooth controllers for whatever reason. So we can't expect to play Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat or some of the other bigger fighting games yet.
Unless they choose to allow it.
Unless they choose to allow it. So.
Right. But I guess the next one that came out.
The next one that came out is the iCade Mobile. And this one's pretty cool. It's made for an iPod Touch or an iPhone 4 or 4S. It doesn't work with the new ones because of the size. Unfortunately, you're stuck to this size
and that
format.
rotates. And
this rotates, so you can play horizontal and you can play vertical. The button action is pretty good. It has the 4 face buttons, and it has a D-pad. And it also has 4 shoulder buttons.
Pretty advanced.
Not bad. And it runs on AA batteries. But otherwise, this is actually pretty cool. I used this for a while to play my iPad on television, to use that as an external controller. And I like the performance on it. I will have to say, like, some things, the D-pad, your finger can sometimes get stuck in between the little lip around the D-pad. It's kind of hard to explain.
It's got a bit of a rim on it.
Yeah, it's got a little rim around there. So, and that's kind of it. I mean, what do you say? You played with it.
I've used it a bit. Yeah, I thought it was pretty good. For my first impression, I thought it was decent. The buttons on the right side were a little knobby, I guess. A little more. I kind of prefer flatter buttons.
XY buttons.
Yeah, but it's a good configuration for a lot of twin stick shooters that I'd like to play.
Yeah.
So it works well for that sort of arrangement. But aside from that, I thought it was pretty decent. So after that is the iCade Core. So this is the stick that Ion decided to replace the larger cabinet with.
Yes.
So essentially, this a very similar type of controller, right? Very similar stick arrangement as the original iCade.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're identical joysticks, identical buttons.
But instead of the full cabinet, you just have a slot here where you can drop in your iPad.
Yes. It also runs on batteries, AC adapter. The one nice thing about these two is that the button layouts are pretty much what most of the game designers are basing their controller layouts on. Whereas something like the Ion Mobile or any of the other, the buttons are situated in different locations, which we'll talk a little bit more about that. But it uses the basic format, and as far as joystick action goes, it's a little noisy, as you can tell, and the buttons are clicky. If you've seen my other YouTube video, I modded my iCade because I didn't like the action on the buttons. So they're, yeah.
And well, there's a bit of resistance. You can kind of feel it in the button too.
Yeah,
it kind of pushes back a bit.
So if you're like a real diehard gamer and or arcade enthusiast, you might have a little bit of issue with that, but I think most people probably won't even know what I'm talking about.
Certainly.
So, but the great thing is it is a moddable controller, so if you do want to stick Sanwa buttons in there, just minor modifications to the case, it's super easy to do, and it'll still work.
But it's, I guess if you don't want something as imposing as this in your room.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of hard to have on your lap and play.
Right.
Whereas that you can use on your lap, or you can use it as a joystick to play your games on the TV.
Yeah, same deal.
And next is
the Junior.
The Junior.
The iCade Junior.
So apparently at some point, iCade had children. And this is the result.
And they named it iCade also.
And yes, the iCade JR. So this is, unlike the iCade, this is more like the iCade Mobile. I would say it uses the same internals. It has the same D-pad. It's very loose D-pad.
Does have the option for a little stick.
It has a little screw-in joystick that you can take off if you don't like, or fall off. But yeah, this just comes off if you don't like it. And the buttons are exactly the same as the mobile, just in a different color. And the awkward thing about this is there's 4 buttons on the back.
Those are the shoulder buttons that would be
shoulder, yeah.
That would be on the mobile.
So when you play, if a game happens to use these, then you can play like that. Now the downside to that is, and this goes back to what game mapping and how the buttons are mapped.
Right.
Some of the games, the buttons are mapped on the back, like for shooting, rather than the front. So it all depends on what game you're playing. That could be a problem for some. For others, maybe it's not an issue. You can play vertical or horizontal. It has a lip here so the phone won't slide out. Another good thing about this, it fits the iPhone 5.
If you do have the taller iPhone 5, you can open up the top. And
you can fit an iPhone 4 with a case on it. It fits in here, so there's quite a bit of room to play in here. It's pretty cool. As far as practicality goes, maybe the least practical of all of them. It's more of, I think, a show-off piece or just the novelty of...
Just the aesthetics of
a little baby
simulating,
arcade.
A little cabinet.
Yeah.
But there is one more option.
Yeah, and that is the ThinkGeek exclusive, 8-bitty.
Which looks a lot like just your standard NES pad.
Yeah,
Almost.
it's... I think dimensions are exactly the same. I think the shell is the same as some of those knockoff NES pads that you see. Batteries.
So yeah, it does...
That uses AAAs, right?
It takes 2 AAA batteries. So if you got standard D-pad here, 4 face buttons, what would be a select and a start button, I guess, and then 2 shoulder buttons as well. Right, it depends on what the game is expecting, but these are just 2 more buttons that can be used for input. But yeah, it's awkward placement in the center there, so you probably don't want to use it during gameplay. And I guess one of the differences with this one is that the button is in a square arrangement, whereas on the mobile, for example, you have a diamond layout, and also on the Junior as well. So if you are expecting to use this for like a twin stick shooter style game where the D-pad moves and then the buttons are used for 4-way shooting or 8-way shooting, the layout is slightly off. So it's a little awkward to try to use this to shoot in directions. So it would be like this lower button for left or down rather. See, this is where the confusion comes in. You're not quite sure how you should the orientation for that kind of a thing. But otherwise, it's a pretty capable controller, pretty comfortable. I find the D-pad on this one a little easier on the thumb as compared to the mobile. And
yeah, it actually works with MAME as opposed to the mobile and iCade Junior, which we couldn't get one of the buttons to work with it.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, by default, it seems to sync up pretty well with that. And then for me, it had the added benefit of also working with my Android phone. As far as the support on Android, there really weren't too many games that I could find that actually worked with it, other than MAME for Droid and
emulators.
Yeah, mostly emulators. I mean, I also tried a Super Nintendo emulator. Worked fine with that right out of the gate. It was really minimal configuration that had to be done to get that to work right. So that worked fine too. But oddly, couldn't get it to work with really any native Android games that I found. I'm gonna have to probably dig a little deeper to see what else it might work with. What other games might accept controller input? So
yeah, I was actually surprised. It feels solid. It's also good if you want to play your games on the TV and hook up your iPhone or iPad or Android device. And so the main thing is you have to make sure the game uses the iCade protocol.
Right.
However, there is an option if you jailbreak. There's an app called Blue Troll, I think it's called. And you can assign buttons to the iCade with like an overlay kind of thing. So that's always an option.
Unofficial options.
Unofficial option, yeah, if you're willing to jailbreak.
But ultimately, if your game doesn't support controller use,
there are options for that too. I have something called a fling, and it flings right out of my hand. This basically, it's one of these. It has that touch sensitive thing. It responds to pad, and it's 2 suction cups, and you just stick it right on your iPad or iPhone, and this little spring in the device acts like a controller,
like a thumb pad,
like almost like an analog pad too, and it just goes back to center when you let go. This surprisingly works really well.
Yeah, it's my biggest problem with a lot of touchscreen controls is that I can't find the center easily.
Yeah,
when they give you a virtual D-pad on the screen.
And as long as the suction cups stay in place and you keep them clean, this works really good. And you can use 2 of them if you have like a dual shooter. The only downside to this is sometimes it will slide out of place if you play for a really long time. And it is awkward to use on a phone because it's so big. And it doesn't work on all D-pads, like on-screen D-pads. So it all depends on the game and if it allows you to resize it, or I would say it works like 90% of the time, but there's a bunch that I tried and it was just not practical. So, but it's cheap and it's pretty good if you just want something quick to take with you. Another option are these things called thummies, which are kind of like colorform type material. They're not suction cups. And
kind of just clings to the screen.
Just clings to the screen, yeah. These were, and the box came with a bunch of them. There's only 2, but it came with like 2 sets of D-pads, a whole bunch of different button configurations. And they're pretty good. You can use them on the phone, the iPad. They don't cover the buttons that much. I mean, the screen that much, so you can still see what you're doing. The only downside I had is they wear out really fast. Like, there's really no stickiness to this at all anymore.
So you find that the surface loses its cleanliness after a while.
As you use it on your screens, and I've cleaned this too, but now when I put it on, it just slides right off. It doesn't stay, so it kind of lost its usefulness. But when it did work, it was pretty good. But, you know, is it really practical to bring this with you? And, you know, when you want to play, you got to stick this on there. I don't know.
Well, yeah, I guess that's one of the questions is like, well, I mean, you know, these are touchscreen devices. Why do you go out of your way to try to crowbar a controller on there? And, you know, the simple fact is that there are unique games being made for these systems that you can't get on other systems. So it's a way to be able to play those games with some type of, you know, controller feedback rather than just trying to use the touchscreen by itself.
Yeah.
But that's a pretty good roundup of a lot of different options. I think.
And just so we didn't get paid by any of these companies. All bought with my own hard-earned cash. And basically, there are other options out there for controllers. But I always liked the iCade. It seems to be the most well-supported and...
most widely used.
Yeah, most widely used. And I think you have a better chance than some of the other companies of getting support from the games that you play. And can you put a phone in here and play this?
You could. Sure. I mean, actually, that's the other thing I guess we want to mention, right? The whole pairing issue with Android devices. I had a tough time getting any of them to sync up properly, except for the original iCade. Synced up with no problem, pretty much. And like we mentioned, the
8-bitty?
The 8-bitty. The 8-bitty will sync up quickly. It doesn't require any kind of password to be entered. So that could be the issue with the other ones. I was able to successfully enter the password when prompted on the iCade, but when trying the other three, the Junior, the Mobile, or the Core on the phone, it would prompt you for a numeric password, and each one of these buttons and joystick movements map to a certain number. And it didn't work, so I don't know if that's just a bad entry, or if it's just not recognizing the enter, or something else.
Or sometimes you could have two like that could be connected to another device, and it might be interfering because you can't connect maybe one device to two things.
Could be.
So there are some issues.
So yeah, I mean, if your goal is to pair up with Android, I would say definitely the 8-bitty is your first choice.
I would say so too. Now, just when you thought I had enough stuff,
I thought that was your stuff for today.
There's more stuff where that came from.
What a surprise.
It is surprising. So now, keeping in the theme for 2012, as a wrap-up, this is another item I acquired in 2012, and it is the Game & Watch Ball.
Now, I thought that thing came out a long time ago.
Well, it kind of did. It didn't. This is the reissue. Unfortunately, it's not the original. But originally, yeah, it was released in April of 83?
80? 83? Somewhere around there.
Somewhere around there. And this was actually the first... It's significant because it's the first Game & Watch game that Nintendo released. So they did reissue this. It was only available through the Nintendo Club. So you had to save up those points that I know everybody does and cash them in for this.
That's a pretty good reward, I think.
This is an awesome reward, yeah.
Compared to some of the other stuff.
And not for, it actually says not for resale, so there's no way that anyone would actually have these to sell in a store. And basically they did a really good reissue of this. It includes even a nice manual based on the original. I don't know if you can see it, but it folds out. Taking it out of the package. And you have
a really nice replica of the original game.
Yeah, so this was, they originally came out in Japan, this reissue, and that was in 2009. And then it was brought to America in 2011. It was made available to us. So in the beginning, these were pretty hot because you could only get them as an import. But now that they've been released across the states, it's a little bit, prices went down a little bit. You could probably find one for around $30, $40 maybe, with the box and everything. Game wise, it's pretty straightforward.
It's the juggling.
You're juggling the ball.
Game.
You're trying to keep it up in the air. You only have a left and right button. It's not much.
So
to
it's
really...
an LCD game. It's not a.
Yeah, it's one of the first, or if not the first, of LCD games.
Were you a fan of the Game & Watch series, the original ones?
I was, yeah. I was a big fan. I'm a big fan of tabletop games and LCD games. So I never was able... I didn't even know they made this. I think my first
So you didn't have an original one?
No. No, my first one was the flip open Donkey Kong. I think it was Donkey Kong 2 it was called. And then I got from whatever came out after that. But this was new to my collection.
So pretty good alternative for someone who wants to jump in on.
Yeah, because if you want an original ball, especially in box, it's going to cost you quite a bit. So this is a nice, cheaper substitute. The only difference is, of course, it has the modern date. It has a different model number. The box is not for resale. It has, of course, the rated E for everyone. And there might be some other minor differences between this and the original, but I don't have an original to really compare it.
As long as you're having fun with it.
Yeah, I like playing with my ball. Sorry, I had to.
You had to go there.
I had to.
Well, that's good. I mean, it's another acquisition for the year.
Yep. I wish Nintendo did more of these reissues.
If Club Nintendo continues to grow, I guess maybe they'll be tempted to.
One thing I wanted to point out about this that actually I didn't even know until a friend of mine pointed it out was that this comes with a stand, so you can display it very nicely. The one I got doesn't have the stand. It's like a cardboard cutout kind of thing that you can fold and it just makes it a display. So mine actually didn't have it, and I didn't realize it until after. But I don't know if that makes a difference to people. But if you do buy it secondhand, just be on the lookout that it's supposed to have another piece of this, a black piece of cardboard.
Cool.
And that's my stuff for this week.
Good stuff.
Good stuff. Now, how about a question? What do we have?
We do have a question.
Do we have to ask you anything today?
Well, the question on my mind was, have you ever stopped playing a game because you got too good at it?
Okay.
And I don't mean that the game was too easy the first time you played it. I mean that you mastered the game. This is a scenario where you actually beat the game because you're better than the game now, and it no longer, has a challenge for you. So you got bored with it and you wanted to move on to a new game. So are there any games that you can think of?
Okay, yeah. I thought about... See, there was two ways of me looking at this. So you kind of clarified it, but originally I thought Tony Hawk, Pro Skater, because I felt like there was a point where I just could not get any better. I was not that great at it.
Right.
Like, I could never get some of the high scores. But, like, I played it so much. It was, like, one of my favorite games for a while. And I played it so much that I just never saw an improvement at some point. It just... That's as good as I was going to get. And, it was good, but it wasn't as good as some of the top players.
Okay.
And then... But to be more like what you just said, more like to answer your question, overall, I would say the wrestling series on the N64, which was like WrestleMania 2000, No Mercy, WCW versus the World or NWO or something, or Revenge, I think it was called. But yeah, those I played a lot, and I played those so much that I got so good at it. That I couldn't play it anymore.
It was just pointless for you.
It was pointless, yeah. Even against most human players, too, because I knew all the tricks, and because there was a lot of little tricks in that game. And it became unfun to play, unfortunately, because I really like those games.
Yeah, I mean,
how about you?
For me, the game that comes to mind was the first Gears of War game for Xbox 360.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, I ran through the game, and normally when I pick up a game, I'll go for the harder difficulty right out of the gate. I mean, I'll max it out wherever I can. So the default is hardcore mode for me.
Really?
Well, that's one step above the normal difficulty. So I finished the game on that, and I ended up unlocking nightmare mode. I said, okay, great, nightmare mode. Let me dive into that. But in the end, I don't know. I guess by that time I had played the game enough that it didn't really seem that much harder to me. I mean, you're supposed to be running around with less hit points, and the enemies are supposed to be a bit smarter about what they do. And you know, the incentive was, you know, you get some achievements out of it, some exclusive achievements if you manage to do certain things while in nightmare mode. But I was running through the game, and I just found it to be not as challenging as I was expecting. So I don't know. I was expecting more of a challenge, and maybe I was just too good at the game at that point. So that was it for me.
Interesting. So
I guess the question is, like, does a game become less fun for you if it's not as challenging anymore? Mm-hmm. And you think it does?
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
Because I mean, part of playing a game is that you want to achieve a goal, mm-hmm. or no matter what if it's points or, you know, beating your opponent or
right.
But if that goal becomes too easy, then as much as I like Super Mario Brothers, they mm-hmm. got to a point where I had to stop playing because, you know, how many times can you go for a high score or best time or things like that, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd say the same is true for me. I mean, obviously you want to feel like you're accomplishing something in terms of a personal challenge. You're playing the game to try to either, you know, get a certain score or, you know, defeat it in a certain amount of time or whatever. You know, whatever goal you set for yourself. And if it's just too much of a cakewalk, then I don't know, I guess it becomes less interesting and you want to
especially
find
when there's so many games to play.
Right.
Like maybe back in, you know, the early days of gaming, you didn't have as many choices, so you
mm-hmm.
can dwell on a game a little bit longer, but
right.
It's like every day there's something else.
It's just too many games and not enough time.
That's right.
That's always the problem. But I guess this is a good time to talk about what games we've been playing and
yeah. Speaking of games,
which ones we thought were
for
our favorites for the year.
So my top games I went with was for shooters, Super Ox Wars.
Okay.
The Jeff Minter game.
I'm familiar with the game.
You're familiar with it?
I've played it.
Yeah,
sure.
So that's basically like Ikaruga.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of, you have to change colors to build up score. Interesting game, fun. Typical Jeff Minter Minotaur craziness that he incorporates in all his games. Puzzle games. I had a lot of fun with war games.
War games, the Whopper Simulator.
The Whopper Simulator. Usually movie to home translations kind of suck. Mm-hmm. But I enjoyed it. It wasn't anything innovative, but you know, it had elements of what I like in games, and it was fun. Mm-hmm. And I also liked Ghost Trick, mm-hmm. which is not a new game, but it was
originally on the DS, right?
Originally on the DS, yeah. And it's a free download from Capcom for the iOS. And I know like the first chapter's free, and then you have to pay for the rest.
Right.
But it really shocked me how good that game is. It's really a lot of fun. It uses the screen.
Really clever.
Yeah, very clever use. The storyline's good. Animations, yeah. Very, very. It's worth it.
Mm-hmm. So for me, yeah, for my favorite shooter, I think Buster Spirits really nailed it for me. You know, it's got great sort of cartoony, pixelized graphics that have a really nice character to them. The controls are super intuitive. It's like relative touch movement, mm-hmm. so you don't have to stay stuck on a virtual D-pad style controller. It'll just sort of follow the traces of your finger wherever they are on the screen. But the game strikes a nice balance between challenge and reward. So it's a tough game in terms of being able to make progress. You'll probably blow up a lot. But the game does reward you often in terms of, you know, survivability.
There are power-ups, right, in that game?
There's a lot of power-ups that'll, you know, as you shoot things, you can collect coins and you can add lives that way. So it'll increase your survivability as you work your way through the game. But it looks great, and it's I think it's a free download at the moment. So
yeah, when I picked it up, it was free. It was a pretty good game. I remember it might look a little cheesy at first, but it is retro inspired. It's got that that look to it, overhead shooter.
Yeah.
But yeah, there is some kind of addictive gameplay to it.
Yeah. Definitely finished it several times. And I have to agree with your pick for puzzle games, for war games, the Whopper game, where you take on the role of the Whopper computer.
Yes.
Who is the sort of the antagonist, or sort of, not really, but you have various human characters from the movie trying to beat you in different trials. So yeah, the gameplay is fun. I mean, it's pretty good. It reminds me a little bit of Puzzle Fighter, but not really. It doesn't really have the same mechanic, but in the sense of where you're chaining together the similar types of tiles. And there's a good amount of strategy that goes into each level. It's not just a simple...
Yeah, because you're constantly fighting against people from the movie who are trying to shut you down.
Yeah.
Right? So you have Matthew Broderick and...
Right.
I forget the other guy's name with the mustache. But it has like little...
Dabney Coleman.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Right, yeah, and they all, they make appearances in the game, and you're trying to beat them all. So that's another game that I plowed through and finished.
Yeah, it was fun.
A couple of times.
I did have one issue with that game, and I really wished tic-tac-toe was included. I thought at the end of the game we were going to have to play tic-tac-toe, but... Right.
No, you had a fake poker game instead. That's what they went with. That would have been smart, though. Yeah, they should have included.
Yeah,
that.
Right.
It would have been a good nod. But when I wasn't on the iPad, I was playing a lot of PC online RPGs. I play a lot of MMO RPGs, and the most notable ones for me this year were, sadly, City of Heroes, a game that I've been playing since it came out. Finally pulled the plug after 8 years. So that was a kind of
people were upset about that.
It was, it had, it wasn't a huge game up to this point. I mean, it looked kind of dated compared to some of the new games coming out, but it had a very loyal fan base. Most of the people that were playing the game have been playing it for a long time, and they had a pretty good retention in terms of keeping those hardcore fans happy. Constantly churning out new content every few months. So it was a really, there was a real big effort from the community to try to save the game and try to convince the publisher to keep it going. But in the end, they weren't successful with that. So the game ended at the end of November. So that will be missed by me. But some of the other game that I've been playing a lot was Star Wars: The Old Republic, which is sort of by BioWare. It's an extension sort of the type of gameplay that you got with Knights of the Old Republic. And if you played that on Xbox or PC, that was a fun game. Great innovative RPG set in the past of Star Wars. It was set 4,000 years before the movies. So it gave them enough room to really create like their own flavor to it. So that really recreated the Star Wars experience for me. The most memorable thing with that game was when I first stepped off the shuttle after building my own lightsaber and leaving the sort of the Jedi training world, landing on Coruscant, the sort of the home world of the Republic, and stepping off the shuttle and looking around, and you saw just this huge like living city around you, and it was really exciting. And you were only level 15, and you had all the way to level 50 to get to the end of the game, sort of. So yeah, the game has been criticized by a few people. They feel like it's mostly a single player game with some multiplayer aspects to it. But it's great that you can play it that way, and then you can still team up with other people if you want to do group activities. So those were the big hits for me this year. We should probably find out if Bit has any input on this.
Well, we picked war games.
That was our common.
Since we both had that in common, we figure if there's one game that's something Bit would like, we think that Bit would enjoy, it would be war games. So we're gonna ask Bit now. You want to do the asking? I think I did it last time.
Sure. I mean,
Bit's opinion.
Yeah. So Bit, I mean, this game lets you take on the role of the computer, and you have humans trying to defeat you. So maybe this will appeal to you. But we think it's a good game too. So we saw even besides that. So what do you think, Bit? You gonna give War Games a try? No.
That was a no.
Sounds like a no.
Wow.
Guess it's not appealing to Bit.
No. Maybe Bit likes fighters.
Well, this is a good thing because maybe Bit, because in that game, the Whopper was trying to destroy the world.
True.
So maybe Bit doesn't want to destroy the world. That's good.
Yeah, it could be some kind of personal feelings about that. Or maybe Bit's jealous because it wasn't in the movie.
It's another movie.
It's another movie.
Another movie that it was not asked to appear in.
Nope.
Don't worry, Bit. You'll have your chance.
See?
Yeah.
It's not over yet.
Yeah.
So until next time, I'm Stephanie.
And I'm Leon.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
Bye-bye.